Welcome back to Workforce Navigator, the podcast where we get into strategies, challenges, and real conversations shaping the future of work and leadership. I'm your host, Rodrigo Alcaine, and if you're tuning in for the very first time, welcome. We're also glad you found us, and to our returning listeners, thank you as always for being here. As you all know, we are in season 2, and today's episode is one I've really been looking forward to. We're talking about modern leadership, what actually looks like, why so many leaders are still operating with this outdated playbook, how mental health fits into the workplace equation, which is timely considering it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and what it means to truly know the people on your team. My guest today spends every day balancing employment law with the human side of leadership. He's a partner at Duane Morris, where he spent almost 17 years helping organizations navigate some of the most complex workplace challenges out there, from harassment prevention and FMLA to performance management and leadership development. He's also a nationally recognized voice on employment issues, featured in the New York Times, USA Today, MSNBC. The list goes on. Sought after keynote speaker, host of the Like a Boss podcast, a mental health advocate, softball coach, husband, and proud girl dad. So we've got a lot in common. I'm really excited to speak to you. Please welcome to Workforce Navigator, Michael Cohen. Michael, welcome.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. That was about the nicest introduction I've ever gotten. I really appreciate that. Very kind of you. Thank you.
Yeah,
really excited to be here.
Awesome. We're excited to dive in. But before we get into kind of the meat and the substance of our discussion, give our listeners just a quick snapshot of your path. How did you end up where you are today, and what keeps driving this work for you?
Sure. So I've been practicing as an employment lawyer for about 30 years. When I was a very junior associate, fifth year associate, it was and I was doing what most employment lawyers who are junior associates in large law firms do, handling an awful lot of employment litigation defense, helped represent organizations when they got sued for things like harassment, discrimination, wage and hour violations. And I absolutely loathed my professional existence. I found the litigation process to be destructive very often, and really just kind of mean more often than I was comfortable with. And I remember I had this incredible boss, and I went into his office, and he knew I wasn't a snowflake. He knew I was willing to work hard. He knew that I appreciated that work is work, and that there are some days it's just not going to be pleasant. And I went into his office and I said to him, listen, I adore you. I love this firm, but this ain't for me. I can't do this for the next 35 years of my life. And he was my unicorn. He was a leader in all senses, in all positive senses of the word. And he said, Mike, slow down a minute. I don't want you to leave. It seems to me you have a couple of pretty transferable skills. The first is, and it was clear to me as soon as I met you, you can connect with people. The second is, you've just started doing these employment law trainings. I want to make you a deal. I'm going to give you billable credit for non-billable time. And I'm sitting there saying, what now? Wow. It sounded like you said you're going to give me billable credit for non-billable time. And I know that can't possibly be the case in a large law firm, because I want you to embrace this training practice. I want you to become a brand. And Rodrigo, I was like 30 years old at the time. I was like, a brand? Sure, that sounds like something I could be. I had no earthly idea what that meant or what it would entail. But in exchange for that, there's one quid pro quo. You are not permitted to say no. So if a small trade organization outside of Salt Lake City, and I'm not making this up, asks you to come talk about some esoteric provision of OSHA, you're going to learn the esoteric provision, you're going to put materials together, you're going to get on a plane, and you're going to go. And from a professional standpoint, it was the single most transformative conversation I've ever had. It was the most impactful moment of my professional life, because he gave me permission to chase this thing that, to be perfectly honest, I didn't realize how passionate I was about until I really started to get into it. And his name's Jim Rediger, and he recently retired. And at his retirement celebration, he's this hulk of a man. He's, when he was younger, 6'4", 230, slick back white hair, and you can't tell I'm none of those things. I'm like 5'6", 150 on my best day. And I reached up and gave him this just giant hug and started tearing up and thanked him for giving me my career, because there was no way I was going to be able to do what most people do in law firms. And I had this leader who created for me what this thing is supposed to look like, and just allowed me to chase my passion. And it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it was it still is a lot of work and a lot of travel and a lot of time away from home. And I happen to have a wife whom I adore and love and also really like a lot. I have the two baddest ass daughters on the planet. But I love my job like 95% of the time. And it's all due to Jim.
That's awesome. There's so many nuggets in that story, and I'd like to kind of acknowledge and or unpack a few of those, because man, it just resonates really well, because I think a lot of us can point back to the single moment in our career where it was incredibly impactful and pivotal, like you just mentioned. But there's a few things that I noticed. I mean, one, I acknowledge you for at that young age in your career to even be able to go and have that conversation in a transparent way to say, hey, wait a minute, I don't know if I want to do this. But even if you take a step back, I have to imagine that Jim modeled an environment in which you felt safe to do that first and foremost. And we talk a lot about leadership back in the day. I know that's something we're going to talk about here in a little bit, but that's a great example that it was back in the day and it was still modeled really strong leadership. But tell me a little bit more. I have to imagine that shaped who you are as a leader today as well. But there's a lot in there where he created space for you to be able to have that conversation, and then he bet on you. And oftentimes it's as leaders, we see things in our folks well ahead of they do. And that all happened in that moment. So tell me more about that.
For sure. And I think your observation is spot on. Jim had created an environment which allowed for, and really he kind of encouraged that kind of open dialogue. He wasn't the leader that wanted you to do what he wanted you to do because he wanted you to do it. He wanted, in this somewhat conservative environment, because large law firms, and I don't mean conservative politically, are overwhelmingly conservative environments. And he had this entrepreneurial spirit about him. He wanted people to be able to, in whatever form it took, be their best selves. He created this sense of collaboration, and he created this sense, and I think it's a leadership superpower. He created this sense of accessibility in himself, in as much as nobody was afraid to go talk to him.
Yeah.
We always knew, and we talked about it all the time, Rodrigo, we always knew that regardless of what was going on around us in the firm, Jim had our back, always. It was such a freeing kind of an environment where you could make mistakes.
That's awesome.
And what it really instilled in me was what leadership should look like. And when done right, the impact it really can have, not just on people's professional lives, but I don't know about you, I'm not great at separating professional from personal all the time, but the impact it has on our personal lives. And I went from being somebody who, and I'm not being hyperbolic, like loathed my professional existence, which of course bled into who I was at home, to somebody who, man, I love what I do, and I have loved what I do for decades now. And that makes me just incredibly, incredibly lucky. And I've tried to take as many of the tools that Jim and other leaders, other coaches, other people with whom I've had the privilege of working or knowing, that they've taught me. You know, listen, I'm a believer, a firm believer, that the most effective leaders, and I think the most effective people, frankly, are those who recognize that they are never the smartest person in the room. And that always, you know, expressions of gratitude are nice, and it's lovely to hear that you did a good job. I'd rather hear from somebody who's smarter than I am or has different insight than I do, and tell me why I was wrong.
That's
and
right.
tell me how to do something better. And this all goes back to Jim. I mean, you could have seen how that conversation could have gone a completely different way,
100%.
right? Who do you think you are?
That's right.
Go do your job. This is your job. This is why we pay you, right? And that it couldn't have gone. And I was not expecting it to go that way,
Yeah.
but it could have.
Yeah. Michael, you brought up, there's often this feeling of that work and life, personal life should be separated. And I believe in more of this integration between the two. And I do feel like as much as we want to leave personal things at home, they do bleed in at work. And as much as we want to leave work at work, they do bleed in at home. It's inevitable, right? The ability to try to compartmentalize that strongly is so difficult. And I think you should share a great example of how that harmony at work for you most likely impacted how you were showing up for your daughters and for your wife at home as well. And I love that. And I think, gosh, we're 5 minutes in. There's so many great nuggets about what good leadership looks like, which is incredible. You started talking about how that conversation could have gone.
Yes.
And most likely often does go that way for many other people and the experience that they have. So that's kind of what we've been talking a little bit about, the moving away from the back in the day leadership is, I think that's where it gets stereotypically categorized. Although you just brought up a great example of what good looks like. What is outdated by that type of approach if it would have gone the other way that you were just starting to describe?
Sure. And the phrase you used is probably my least favorite phrase in the English language. And it is one of the things that I battle against as much as I can in the conversations I have with leaders and with employees every day. And that's the phrase back in my day.
Mm-hmm.
And back in my day, understand it's a mindset. Back in my day doesn't have an age, and back in my day doesn't have a gender or a race or an LGBTQ plus membership or national origin or religious belief. Back in my day is the 6 inches between your ears. It's the way you think. And it's the idea that we are going to continue to do things the way we have always done things. Why? Because it's easy, because it's worked so far, because that's the way things always have been done. There's this wonderful clip from a TV show called Abut Elementary, which is based on a public school here in the greatest city in the universe, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where they're talking about a new process. And one of the faculty members who's been at the school for years and years and years says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. New projects mean new problems. That's back in my day. Mm-hmm. I don't want to innovate. I don't want to change things. I don't want to be a little uncomfortable for a period of time, even if it meant that level of uncomfortability, albeit for, again, a short period of time, could lead to much more significant success. And I'm not suggesting that we don't learn from the past. We have to learn from the past. But if we get mired in the way that we have always done things and are unwilling to accept innovation and creativity, and by the way, failure, because that's going to come along with those attempts at innovation and creativity. But the other side of the failure is where the enhanced innovation and enhanced creativity comes. And if we allow for that, we can do some spectacular things inside of our workplaces, not just from a production standpoint or profitability standpoint, but really from a workplace culture standpoint, to create an environment. Are we going to create utopia? No. But an environment that really does preach the values that are important to us and that creates a situation that's as comfortable as possible for as many as possible, as much of the time as possible.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a level of just having this level of open-mindedness to everything that you bring, and the curiosity. And as leaders, how do you model that? Oftentimes you're pretty convicted on maybe this way is the way it's done, but then asking questions like, hey, how could I be wrong about this? And have teams challenge that and have really good dialogue about those things. Are you in your work that you've done? It seems to me that that type of leadership is starting to is evolving, right? We're seeing good cases of that type of work. What do you think has fundamentally changed from now as in the kind of proverbial back in the day discussions around leadership?
I think there's a lot more attention being paid to empathy-based, human-based leadership. There are people who still really will do everything they possibly can to avoid it and will continue to say things like, I'm not going to thank somebody for doing their job, or I thank them every week by giving them a paycheck. Anachronistic notions that chase really good people away from workplaces. But I do think with the availability of different kinds of content from different forms, and in my experience, effective leaders' genuine desire to get and to be better, we're starting to understand it. And mental health is a piece of it, and I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but I do think it's a wonderful example because it has been ignored for just so long. And understand, I come at it from a very different perspective. Both of my parents are mental health professionals. They're also the two most divorced human beings in the planet, like can barely be in a room together. But I grew up where emotional intelligence was really valued and it was talked about an awful lot. So it's heartening to me when I go into organizations, whether they are law firms, whether they are Fortune 50 companies, whether they are professional sports franchises, or whether they're 5-person non-for-profits. And you see leaders who really understand that in order to get the best out of the people who they have responsibility for, and that's our job, that they cannot continue to do things the way they've always done things. They focus on human-based leadership, humanizing yourself, sharing interests. Rodrigo, I had a boss. It was one of my first bosses I had out of law school, and he was a brilliant man. He was not a great boss. He threw binders and he would explode, really impressive stuff. But he did one thing very, very well that probably actually made me hang out at that firm a little bit longer than I should have. And it was he tried to share interests. He tried to have dialogue and conversations with me that had nothing to do with the practice of law. I am from Philly. I am all gross stereotypes associated with Philadelphia sports fandom. And every Monday morning during the professional football season, he would come into my office, he would sit down, and he was from the UK. And he would say, Michael, did you see the football match yesterday? And every Monday morning I would say football game. We call it a football game. But I dug what he did.
Yeah.
He was trying to create that connection. He was trying to make clear to me that he wasn't only brilliant lawyer guy, which he really, really was, but he was a person. Now, once he started throwing binders again, everything else kind of went away. But that kind of attention is crucial. And yes, it takes time. And I am not naive to say it can just happen. But knowing the people with whom we work on a personal level, knowing the people who report to us as people is critical. It's absolutely crucial. It is almost everything. You cannot lead everyone the same. I'm a softball coach. Aside from being called husband, aside from being called dad, my favorite thing in the whole wide world is to be called Coach Mike. Mm-hmm. And I have the privilege of coaching 13 or 14 young women every year. And something I learned very, very early on, and it's translated to my work life as well, is 100% consistency is nonsense. Thinking that you're going to get the best out of everybody by treating everyone the same is absurd. Both of my daughters were pitchers, which, by the way, is all the evidence you need to know that they hate their parents, because there's nothing worse than being the parent of a pitcher. And my older daughter, Mia, is 5 feet nothing. She's 100 and nothing. And she was a 4-year all-league first-team pitcher because she's the most competitive person I've ever met in my entire life. Like, she would cut you to win. And it was super easy to coach her because all I had to do was challenge her and tell her she wasn't good enough. And that worked. Mm-hmm. My younger daughter, Maddie, is a much kinder soul. My younger daughter, Maddie, is a much more thoughtful and sensitive person. She does not have the level of confidence that her sister has. When I first started coaching Maddie, I tried to coach her the same way I coached Mia. And the problem was, when I told her she wasn't good enough, she believed me. Mm-hmm. And I lost her. it didn't work. So you've got to evolve. You've got to evaluate what's going on. You cannot treating everybody fairly. It does not mean treating everybody the same. You see my guy, AI, over my shoulder, Allen Iverson, his head coach was Larry Brown when he was with the Sixers. And I heard an interview with Larry Brown, and what Larry Brown said when he was asked the question, how were you more than any other coach able to get so much out of Allen? He said essentially the same thing I just said. What he said was, I treat everybody fairly, but that does not mean I treat everybody the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't assume one size fits all, because it never does.
That's right. Yeah. What a powerful real life story and example. I appreciate you sharing. And you talked about two things there. Well, actually, I want to go back to one of the things that you said is kind of the fundamental change that you've seen is also leaders genuinely, the ones that are most effective are generally the ones that actually want to improve and are genuinely authentically curious, right? Instead of trying to fake it. And I think that's absolutely true. If that authenticity really exists, it just becomes natural. So that's a really good point. The other piece you talked about is just like you got to know your daughters uniquely and what drives them and what motivates them and will help you coach them. How well do most leaders actually know their employees to be able to do that? The whole employee, right? And does that gap really matter today? And obviously it does. You just mentioned it, but how well do you think managers really know their employees today?
I think the good ones know them well.
Yeah.
And Rodrigo, I don't mean to diminish the time that it takes to establish this kind of a relationship with employees. It does take time. It costs you exactly $0.
That's right.
But it does consume time. But what you find is the leaders who take that time and understand what's going on in people's lives and what is happening around them and what motivates them and what scares them, how far you can push outside of their comfort zone to really get that extra edge that they may need in some way. That's what separates the mediocre leaders from really the great leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And what we find over and over again is great leaders instill this sense of loyalty. And I don't mean blind loyalty, and I don't mean like mob kind of loyalty. I mean, they'll run through fire for you. They want to do and be good for you as their boss, as their leader, as their mentor, because they see the amount of time that you have spent with them and the interest you have in their success. And with that kind of loyalty, it of course leads to retention.
Mm-hmm.
Because people who have that level of loyalty and appreciate their leaders as much as they do, they don't go anywhere. It enhances recruiting efforts, and you know this better than anybody, that the word on the street is a very, very powerful thing. And when your employees internally are talking externally about how wonderful an environment you have created, you are able to attract the caliber of talent that you want to attract. So this loyalty and this efficiency and this retention and this recruitment all points to the same thing, which is massive success, productivity, and profitability, and enhancing culture, and all of those things that we all should really include as top end goals as leaders. But again, it doesn't happen because tomorrow you say, I'm going to be a better leader. It has to be intentional.
That's right.
There are steps that all of us can take to enhance the likelihood of our employees succeeding.
That's right.
It takes time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also it's the power of and though, right? So you can get to know your employees at a very deep level and understand their world outside of what happens at work. But you also have to be a good leader and a good manager, right? It doesn't give you permission to throw binders just because you know who they are intimately, right? It's got to be the and, not the or, and you got to bring it all together. So I think that's a great point.
And you used the word authenticity earlier, and I think that's Captain Obvious. I mean, that's crucial because the leader that I talked to you about was inauthentic. It rang after a little bit. It rang very, very hollow. because when he would come in on the Monday morning and I would have the conversation with him, and then for the balance of the week and usually into the weekend, he just was not that cat. All of a sudden, now I'm sitting there thinking, can we dispense with the nonsense on Monday morning?
Mm-hmm.
It's not doing anything other than wasting my time.
That's right.
Because
you see right through it.
What's happening the rest of the time is so wildly inconsistent with this 15 minutes that I don't buy it anymore.
Right.
So the authenticity piece is incredibly important, whether it's right with a podcast, whether it's with leadership, whether it's with your friends or as a partner or a parent. Consistency is incredibly important. When people don't know what they're going to get day in and day out, like I would rather work for somebody who is incredibly difficult all the time than to really not understand what I'm going to get, not even day to day, sometimes moment to moment. I can prepare myself for the jerk. I can prepare myself for the leader with unrealistic expectations. What I can't do, or what is incredibly difficult to do, is work for somebody who's constantly up and down. And I have. Mm-hmm. And you leave those places.
Absolutely. And you can feel the energy shift when someone shows up that way, even virtually and in person. And I think we've all been around those folks where, it's like, hey, I'm not sure what gym I'm getting today, or I'm not sure what Mike's going to show up today. That is not a good place for anyone to live at any given time. And we talked a little bit about this earlier, but in the discussion around mental health, and I love your perspective around this, because it's, certainly has moved from a peripheral topic to a really central one in the workplace conversations. And given it's Mental Health Awareness Month, I just put a post on LinkedIn about it, sharing my challenges with mental health as well. What role should leaders really play in supporting the teams around this, and how do we create environments where, one, it's safe to talk about, and then two, how do we support it even better than we are right now?
So what role? Massive, uncompromising, unhesitating, consistent. The numbers are staggering. 26% of all adults, U.S. adults in the workplace struggle with some kind of mental health concern each year. The rate of suicidal ideation has increased every year since 2011. Roughly 2/3 of all U.S. workers say they have suffered from some diagnosable mental health disorder in the last year, and fewer than 20% of them have actually gotten help. And those are numbers from the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And while those numbers are terrifying, I know they're not right, because I know they're low, because I know these kinds of concerns are incredibly and disturbingly underreported. And while those numbers are really horrifying, the number that scares me the most is the average period of time between the onset of mental health symptoms and the receipt of treatment is 11 years.
Wow.
And when I have this conversation with employees and with leaders all the time, I say, the comment that always follows is, would you ever allow a physical manifestation of some kind of illness or injury to go on 11 years without receiving treatment? And the answer to which hopefully is no, but we do it with mental health. And I will tell you that as leaders, we bear a significant burden for that underreporting and for that uncomfortability or that refusal or that unwillingness on the part of the employee to go get help. There's this one survey or study that I come back to all the time. Roughly 71% of all leaders who were interviewed in this study said that mental health concerns are too costly, or addressing mental health at work is too costly. And to quote my favorite comedian, John Mulaney, first of all, no, it's just wrong. And what it also doesn't take into account are things like lack of efficiency, lack of productivity, attendance issues. 69% of those leaders who were surveyed said that paying attention to mental health now shouldn't be a priority because why? It wasn't back in my day. And it's interesting because you juxtapose numbers like that with a 2023 study that the American Psychological Association did that said that 81% of people who are looking for jobs will seek out an employer who prioritizes mental health. So leaders are saying this, but we have pretty concrete data to prove that they're wrong. They're not right. So what can we do as leaders, right? Like, what should we be doing every day? I think there's a few things, right? One, we embrace the hard conversation. When an employee comes to us, we make sure that we lock in. We are with them empathetically, compassionately, intellectually, non-competitively, and we are engaged. We are not shying away. We are not going earmuffs. We are embracing notions of equity with respect to mental health. What does equity have to do with mental health? A lot of us were raised to believe that mental health concerns weren't real. Or if they were a weakness of some kind. Just rub some dirt in it. You'll be fine. Just walk it off. You'll be fine. You know what back in my day, Rodrigo, back in my day I'll say, right? I picked myself up by my bootstraps. Why can't this person do the same? And my response is, first of all, you were born on third base and think you hit a triple. Second, not everybody's got bootstraps. Not everybody has the experience to even know that they are confronting a mental health concern, let alone what to do with it. Two more things, and I apologize for sort of
No, I love this. Please keep going.
Meandering. Two things I think that are crucial that leaders have to do. The first one is what I call getting in the hole. And that comes from a parable. There's this guy walking down the street and he falls into a hole. And the walls are steep and there's no way for him to get out. And a few minutes later, a doctor walks by and he screams out, "Doctor, I've fallen into this hole and I can't get out." Doctor writes out a prescription, throws it into the hole, keeps on walking. A few minutes after that, a member of the clergy walks by, writes out a prayer, throws into the hole, keeps on walking. A few minutes after that, a leader walks by, sees the person in the hole, and immediately jumps in the hole. And the person in the hole is stunned and looks at the leader and says, "What are you doing? Now we're both down here." And the leader looks at the person and says, "Yes, but I've been down here before and I know the way out." The most effective leaders I have ever seen, the most effective leaders with whom I have ever worked, they live in the hole. They make clear to the people with whom they work and who work for them that they are there at all times for any reason or none. And it's not just words, it's actions. It's showing up. It is the check-ins, what I like to refer to all the time as spontaneous planned check-ins. It's like, bro, those words mean the opposite of each other. Yeah, they're planned for me. As the leader, I know they're coming because they're on my Outlook calendar. And I'm going to check, hey, what's working, what's not working. One of my favorite leadership phrases, how can I be of service to you? What is it that I can do? How can I use my equity inside of this organization for your betterment? So one, we get in the damn hole. We live in the hole. We don't leave the hole. Second, and Rodrigo, I was so grateful to hear you said what you said a couple of moments ago. And that was you're referring to your own mental health struggles. And I have had them as well, particularly and most recently and most significantly last summer. And I've talked about this a number of different times on my podcast and in writings I've done. I've had very different relationships with my two daughters. My older daughter, Mia, was mine from birth. She came out and she was walking around when she was 2 years old. I love my mom, but I love my dad more. And I'm like, shh, that's my girl. My younger daughter, Maddie, I didn't have the same relationship with. And when Mia was getting ready to leave for college, I was really sad, but I had no worries. She's made of leather. She was going to be fine. And she was. After Mia left for school, and Maddie, understand, our relationship was very different. And when Mads was little, we called her GTM, which stood for Good Time Maddie, which is a nickname, by the way, I'm very pleased has disappeared as she's gotten older. Because she was just such a pleasure, Rodrigo. She was the kid who was always smiling. You could wake her up and play with her. She was just a joy to be around. And as happens, we evolved. And as Maddie got older, she became a little more serious and she developed what has become a pretty meaningful anxiety disorder, which through therapy, in which through medication, she's doing great. She's good. I didn't handle it very well when she was younger. A lot of the way the anxiety manifested itself was through indecision, and I'm not great with indecision. And I got very frustrated, and I acted like a giant ass a lot of the time. And we were unpleasant to be around. We bickered and we fought constantly. And it was an interesting thing happened when Mia left for school. Um, Maddie and my relationship changed pretty dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it, I think, was because I stole time that dads just shouldn't be entitled to in cars and in planes and in buses for softball. She started a business and would ask me routinely for help, sitting on a bucket while she was working on a drop ball or on a curveball. I stole hours and days and weeks and months. And when Maddie was getting ready to leave for college last summer, I had this sort of uncontrollable and inconsolable worry because of the anxiety that she had dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really struggling. I wasn't sleeping at all. I don't mean I was getting like 3 hours a night. I wasn't sleeping.
Yeah.
I was crying all the time. For the first time in my life, I was experiencing physical manifestations of anxiety. Really, really having a hard time. And I have a good buddy named Andy, Rodrigo, and everybody should have an Andy. You can't have mine. Go find your own. Andy's one of my closest friends. He lives in the neighborhood, and we were going for a walk one day, having a cup of coffee, and he could tell I was not in a good place. And I shared with him what was going on. And he said to me, plain and simple, he's like, I don't have an answer other than to tell you, go talk to a therapist, and other than tell you, I'm here. And a couple blocks after he said that to me, he kind of stopped me. He did like, the mom arm when the car stopped short. He stopped me and he said to me, Michael, it occurs to me that there are two kinds of people in the world. There are those who struggle and there are liars. And I will never forget that moment. For whatever reason, I thought I was, which is so absurd because I talk about it every day. But when it hit me personally, I thought, A, I was the only one, and B, my deal wasn't that big a deal. And I did the things that I would have told anybody else to do, and talked to therapists with whom I've worked at different times during the course of my life, and did some of the things and used some of the tools that she provided to me and that I had in my box to begin with. And like, I'm good. But it took somebody saying words like that to me. And it's a long story, and I apologize because it takes me to where what I think the second important part is, and that is making sure that our employees understand that, and I know it sounds trite, that it's okay not to be okay. And that when we as leaders, and not all of us are comfortable doing it, but if we can share those vulnerabilities, share the fact that we've struggled as well, goodness, doesn't that open the door? Isn't that as powerful a message as you can give as a leader, that it's okay to talk about this, and that I have been there. In fact, I did a podcast when I was struggling, which I didn't want to do. But my wife Jamie basically said to me, if you don't do this, I don't even know who you are. You are a hypocrite. You are full of crap. Why do you think you're different or better than anybody else? So I did it. And then I just did one last week, sitting in Maddie's room because I picked her up from college and came back, and talked about this very subject, Rodrigo, which is the power of leaders who have gone through mental health struggles and how they can use those struggles for the benefit of the people who work for them. And I think the biggest gift you can give is that of vulnerability, is that of making clear to your people that not only is it completely part of the human condition, not only that you've been there yourself because you are in fact human, but that you're here for them.
Yeah.
It destigmatizes, it demystifies, it gives you that level of accessibility that is invaluable.
Yeah. And Michael, that's I appreciate you sharing. Very profound. I was found myself working, just trying not to get emotional, not only just hearing the story, but also just relating to my story. And I think that piece, that last piece that you just said, that's how you close the 11-year gap. Because I think about my journey, and I think about folks that I've been surrounded with and their journey, and a lot of it is to that. You either grow up thinking hey, there's nothing wrong with you, just put some dirt on it, take a nap, sleep. In fact, my LinkedIn post speaks a lot about that. And to be honest, when I posted that, I did one of these, like close my eyes and hit post. Because of those reasons. And I said, you know what? It's like, if no one else is talking about it, I need to talk about it. Not only for my organization and the one that I lead, but for those out there. And the amount of overwhelming DMs that I've gotten as a result of that has been, and in fact, to be honest, if it was just one, it would have been all worth it. But the amount that I've received since then has been overwhelming, sharing like, hey, me too, all these different things. And I think you're absolutely right, is creating that space for people to be comfortable to speak to that and be empathetic as a leader, say, hey, I too go through these. And I think about my daughter, my 12-year-old Mila, where we're seeing anxiety and all these things manifest through her, and how I'm showing up and how I'm handling it, and frustration with myself because I don't know if I'm doing it the right way. So I feel that it pulled on my heartstrings for sure around with your daughters, and you're right. Everyone does need an Andy. So and I won't take yours, I promise, but gosh, it's resonated so much for me, and I know it will for our audience as well. So thank you so much for sharing those things. And
it's interesting, Rodrigo, because I had the exact same experience after I posted what I posted last summer, and that was the outpouring of care from people. And it does come back to, I do believe most people seek to be and to do good and to help people whom I had not spoken with in years showing up.
Yeah.
It's also interesting to see the people who are wildly uncomfortable at having conversations of this nature.
That's right.
One of the kindest things that happened to me after I shared that message was an organization with which I deal in the Pacific Northwest. Wonderful, wonderful people. I don't know, maybe 2 weeks later, I got a box that I didn't know what it was, and I opened it up, and it was this bracelet. I couldn't really figure out what it was, and I saw who it was from, and then I looked more closely, and what they had sent me was a bracelet with the coordinates of the University of Michigan on it, which is where my older daughter graduated from and where my younger daughter currently is.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, I get the chills now. I never take it off. It's just,
wow.
It's a constant reminder of a couple of things, right? It's one, just, it's my girls.
Yeah.
And second, it's the capacity for kindness that humans have when they are thoughtful and when they take a minute, or for some people, it's just intuitive. But it was just the words, the outpouring was really.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Incredibly kind.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
You touched on earlier accessibility for leaders. And I think even being open and honest with our individual struggles as leaders as well creates more accessibility. People feel safe, just like Jim did for you. There's a notion, though, accessibility is certainly built to trust, but I know that there's this fear and worry that, hey, do you lose authority or do you blur the professional lines when you do that? And how do you navigate that tension?
It's hard. I don't have a silver bullet.
Yeah.
The ability to connect with people on this personal and human level does have some level of risk associated with it. Because there are conversations you're going to have with employees that, from an employment lawyer standpoint, are not advisable conversations to have with employees. Like, hey, what is going on? You're not yourself. What's wrong? Because what employment lawyers who don't appreciate the human condition will tell you is you're begging for an ADA claim, an Americans with Disabilities Act claim, a situation like that. And listen, I'm not suggesting you have that conversation with everybody. I think there's a difference when you've worked with somebody for 20 minutes and you've worked with somebody for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think one way that we can enhance the likelihood of accessibility that we all can do better is, and I love this phrase. It's a phrase I learned years ago, and that is, we can inspire calm. And again, I'm gonna break news here. I'm gonna split the atom right here in front of you. We live in times that are complicated and that are confusing, and for many, in moments, are just plain scary. And if, as leaders, we recognize that, as we talked about at the beginning, we can't always separate what's happening outside of the walls and inside the walls at work, and we appreciate that people are confused and people are struggling, if we can stop going from 0 to apoplectic in 0.4 seconds, if we can maintain composure in those situations where things go sideways, and the only thing we know for sure is that things will go sideways at some point. If we are able to really and truly, in a meaningful way, allow for failure, we can inspire calm. And with this inspiration of calm truly does come a level of accessibility, because when an employee or a person feels like they can come and talk to you and there are not going to be dire consequences for an acknowledgement of wrongdoing or of failure or of perceived weakness or whatever it happens to be, now all of a sudden you've enhanced dialogue. And when you increase and enhance dialogue and you can allow for the free exchange of ideas, no matter how seemingly ridiculous they may be at their inception, I mean, we've massively increased our level of accessibility. And as I said, I do think accessibility is a superpower. As from a leadership standpoint, when employees feel that they can come and talk to us about pretty much anything, and it doesn't mean it's devoid of respect. That still exists. But they can come talk to us with this free exchange without this fear of retribution or retaliation. Yeah. We've massively increased accessibility, and all accessibility does, again, is increase retention, is increase recruitment, is increase efficiency and productivity and profitability and loyalty and all of those other things that we've talked about.
Absolutely. And it's also a bit of a mindset shift, because I know oftentimes, including me at times, where someone will reach out that's maybe multiple levels below in the organization, below meaning from a org chart perspective, and they'll reach out and share an observation or share something. And sometimes our first is like, why is this getting to me? Like, why? And then part of it's like taking a step back and say, wait a minute, what a gift that someone that reports to a direct report that reports to another person felt comfortable and safe enough to come to you and share something. Like, that's the bigger signal. And taking time to pause and say, wait, this is actually a gift. This is a good signal, right? So I think that's really, really important for us to do that sometimes. And
the problem is we know too many people who do the exact opposite, right? They inspire chaos and they inspire tension and they inspire fear. I used to work with a guy, like, I didn't even like walking past his office when he wasn't there. Because you would get sucked into the vortex of fear and stress. And like, literally, and I'm using the word literally the way it's intended to be used, like, literally he didn't have to physically be present and you still felt it. Yeah. And of course, that's the same person who's constantly in the head of recruiting's office or in TA's office saying, why can't you get me any good employees? Right? It's always that person. And you just want to hold the mirror up and say, we have them, they don't stay, and here's why.
Here's why. Yeah. Yeah. The calm discussion reminds me, early in my career, a leader said to me, composure is often a true sign of leadership. And I think that kind of rings true a lot of times with the calmness that you create and the environment you create as a leader as well. So I love that. Okay. A lot of great discussions here. I think you had me laughing, also almost brought me to tears, all in less than an hour. So I certainly appreciate it. Um, if a leader is listening to this and wants to generally become a better leader starting today, what would you say is a single mindset shift you'd put in front of them to think about?
Such a good question. Okay, got it. It's a quote. One of my favorite people ever on this planet was Robin Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Robin Williams, for those who don't know, was an actor, was a comedian. No hyperbole at all. A brilliant, brilliant man.
Yes.
And also a man who struggled with meaningful mental health concerns throughout the entirety of his life. And attributed to Robin Williams is my favorite thing anybody has ever said out loud. And it has become, to a degree, my North Star in terms of the way I work with people and the way I lead. And what Robin Williams said was, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind always. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. And I don't think truer words, Rodrigo, have ever been said. I think everyone you know, including yourself, everyone we don't know, is dealing with stuff that none of us knows about. And I think intellectually, we all understand that statement to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is, as leaders, we bury it in the back under all the crap. Move it up front.
Yeah.
Let that be your base assumption, that everyone you meet is dealing with something about which you have absolutely no clue or idea. And it's just not that hard to be kind.
That's right. Nor is it your job to dictate if that's hard enough or not hard enough, right?
For sure.
I agree. Well said. Gosh, yeah, definitely amazing conversation, Michael. I think a perspective that many people need to hear and listen. So I think you left a lot of amazing nuggets for a lot of leaders or anyone that's really listening to this conversation. And quite frankly, a conversation I didn't know I needed to have. And I'm so grateful that I've been able to start my morning with you. So for anyone who wants to follow your work, connect with you, or listen to Like a Boss, where should they go?
The Like a Boss podcast is available on Instagram, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. If you just put in Like a Boss and Michael Cohen, it'll come right up. Easiest way to find all of my content is on LinkedIn, in all likelihood. And if you put in Michael Cohen and Dwayne Morris, you'll get me right away.
Yeah, awesome. Well, consider yourself adding another subscriber. So I'll certainly be doing that. And for everyone listening, thank you for being here. Today's conversation sparked something for you. Share it with someone on your leadership team. I know it certainly has for me. These are the kind of conversations that are certainly worth spreading. Until next time, we'll see you then. And thanks again, Michael, for joining us. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you.